Petula Clark, the woman who made the world smile with just 2 words, downtown, did not rise to the top on pure glamour alone. She reached it through war, through pressure, through choices that could never be undone. When audiences heard the joy in Petula Clark's voice, few realized that behind that smile lay a life tightly controlled, torn apart by schedules, contracts, and unspoken rules that women in the entertainment industry were forced to accept if they wanted to survive. Success came too early, carrying with it the loss of the right to be vulnerable. She was praised, yet exploited, celebrated, yet unprotected. There were moments when a single humane gesture on television was enough to expose her to threats and the fury of an entire system. Global fame brought Petula Clark tens of millions of records sold, the world's greatest stages, and a position rare in music history. But the price was a quiet separation from her family, a sense of guilt that lingered for decades, and wounds she chose to keep to herself. Her life was not the fairy tale of a fortunate star, but a story of survival, of a woman forced to be stronger than her own talent. The story of Petula Clark is not merely the journey of a star, it is a prolonged dialogue between talent and its cost. And it is precisely at that intersection that truths few ever expected begin to emerge. It is precisely at that intersection between light and its cost that Petula Clark's journey begins to take on its earliest, clearest shape, not on grand stages, but in the cramped, unstable, and turbulent years of wartime Britain. She was born under the name Sally Clark in November 1932, into a working-class family where both her father and mother worked as nurses at Long Grove Hospital on the outskirts of London. Life offered little room for romance or long-held dreams. Endless shifts, modest wages, and the heavy atmosphere of the pre-war years shaped a childhood accustomed early to discipline and silence. When the war broke out, the family moved repeatedly between London and Wales to escape the bombings. That constant disruption meant Petula never had a fixed place to put down roots. No childhood anchored to a single community. Only an ability to adapt that developed so early it became almost instinctive. Music entered her life not as a choice, but as a natural reflex. Her mother was a classically trained soprano, and during the rare moments of family togetherness left intact by wartime conditions, Petula quickly revealed an unusual ability, far beyond her years, to remember melodies, imitate voices, and control pitch. As bombs became the background noise of daily life, her voice carried a strangely calming quality. Not loud, not showy, but enough to make people stop and listen. By the age of 7, Petula was already singing in spaces never meant for children, miners' pubs in Wales, crowded gatherings thick with cigarette smoke and exhaustion. At 9, a visit with her father to a BBC studio to record a message for relatives serving overseas led, by chance, to a defining moment. As air raid sirens intensified and tension filled the shelter, Petula was asked to sing to calm those present. Her small but steady voice quickly escaped the confines of the room, traveling through the radio waves and becoming something the public needed even more than entertainment, a temporary sense of peace amid chaos. From that point on, Petula's childhood was no longer measured by school terms or games, but by the number of radio appearances and performances for soldiers, hospitals, and bomb shelters. While other children were shielded from the war, she became part of it, not as a victim, but as a psychological instrument placed upon society's shoulders far too early, and with a weight far too heavy. Her frequent appearances during the war years quickly carried Petula Clark beyond the label of a mere child with a pretty voice. The public needed a symbol, and the press supplied one with the easiest shorthand they could find: Britain's Shirley Temple. The name was both an honor and an invisible frame that locked her age in place. When Petula stepped onto the stage of the Royal Albert Hall at an age when many children barely understood what a stage was, Britain did not simply see talent. It saw an image to cling to, pure, obedient, and not allowed to change. Within that glow, cinema came looking for her. One director recognized that her voice could hold its ground before a camera, and Petula entered film almost without transition. Medal for the General appeared in 1944, followed by I Know Where I'm Going in 1945, placing her alongside some of the great names of British cinema, such as Powell and Pressburger, and seasoned actors like Alec Guinness. On screen, Petula brought a rare authenticity for a child performer. She never overplayed, never sought to charm deliberately, but simply appeared with a seriousness of focus that earned the respect of adults. Grueling shooting schedules, bitter cold in remote locations, long working days. She endured them all with the discipline of someone already accustomed to treating work as duty, not play. Yet alongside her professional growth, a contradiction grew steadily sharper. The production system, particularly the rank organization, did not see Petula as a human being in the process of growing up, but as an image to be preserved. They worked to keep her frozen in a cute and ageless mold, delaying every sign of maturity in order to prolong the profitable life cycle of a child star. Crude interventions into her appearance, measures designed to conceal the body's natural changes, caused not only physical discomfort, but lasting psychological pressure. Petula sensed clearly that her talent was moving forward, while the image imposed by the industry insisted on holding her still. At an age when self-discovery should have been permitted, she was forced to learn restraint. Wanting to be recognized as a developing artist, yet constantly pushed back into the role of the national child, Petula faced her first internal conflict. Between the person growing inside and the innocent shell, the system refused to let her shed. From that quiet tension, the first cracks in her relationship with the entertainment industry began to form. The prolonged confinement within film made Petula Clark realize early that if she continued along the same path, she would remain trapped in the image others needed, rather than the person she was becoming. In the early 1950s, a decisive choice was made. Music would become the central axis of her career, no longer a secondary branch of film or radio. It was not a retreat, but the only way to reclaim control over her own pace of growth. The early years of that decision were anything but easy. Petula entered the British recording market as someone newly freed from the child star mold, yet still required to prove she was more than a wartime memory. The Little Shoemaker, released in 1954, became a telling test case. She herself felt little attachment to the song, finding it too light and childlike, but the outcome defied expectations. It reached the top 10 in the UK and climbed to number 1 in Australia, making Petula the first British female artist to achieve that feat. Success followed with Suddenly There's a Valley, with All My Heart, and others, keeping her name firmly on the charts and leading to increasingly large tours, some drawing crowds of hundreds of thousands, a rare scale for a young female singer at the time. Petula's true distinction lay in her ability to see the world ahead of her era. Rather than settling for the domestic market, she deliberately recorded the same songs in multiple languages, English, French, German, Italian, not through superficial translation, but as distinct versions shaped to suit the musical sensibilities and rhythms of each country. This demanded extraordinary auditory memory, rapid adaptability, and punishing workloads, at a time when the idea of a global star scarcely existed. Those recordings paved the way for an even bolder move, leaving Britain to enter continental Europe. Paris became her new anchor when Petula signed with Vogue Records. At the time, she spoke little French, yet that did not prevent French audiences from embracing her as something remarkable. Chariot quickly became a hit, later gaining wider recognition through its English version, I Will Follow Him. Ya Ya Twist exploded in popularity, selling over 1 million copies in France and lifting Petula beyond the status of a foreign star into a genuine part of everyday musical life. In a Europe still divided by borders, languages, and the lingering memory of war, Petula Clark quietly built a cross-border career through voice and discipline alone, laying the groundwork for what decades later would be called globalization in music. The expansion into continental Europe gave Petula Clark a solid footing, but it also created a new paradox. In Britain itself, the country where she began and where she had once been a national symbol, her career started to stall in the early 1960s. British popular music was changing rapidly under the influence of youthful rock, while Petula was increasingly seen as an artist who had already settled, too polished, too refined, too mature. She was still recording, still performing, but the momentum for reinvention no longer seemed to lie in that familiar market. It was in this context that Tony Hatch arrived with an unfinished melody called Downtown. Petula was not immediately convinced. The lyrics felt too direct, the structure too simple, unlike the multi-layered recordings she had grown accustomed to shaping in Europe. The recording session unfolded in a mood of doubt and was repeatedly disrupted by technical problems, power outages, long delays that pushed the atmosphere to the breaking point. At one stage, she even considered walking away, yet it was precisely that frustration that forced everyone toward a single decision. The track had to be finished at all costs, as if there were no way back. At the end of 1964, Downtown was released almost simultaneously in multiple countries, an unusual move at a time when music markets still operated largely in isolation. The initial response was so swift it was almost unmanageable. Within weeks, the song climbed the US charts, breaking through barriers that had long been unforgiving to British female artists. In January 1965, Downtown reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Petula Clark the first British woman to achieve this in the rock era. The achievement was more than a statistic. It shattered the assumption that the American market reserved its center stage exclusively for young male bands. That same year, the song earned her a Grammy for Best Rock and Roll Recording, a victory laden with meaning amid fierce competition. The ripple effect was immediate. From 1964 to 1968, Petula placed 15 consecutive songs in the US Top 40, an extraordinary run for a female artist of the time. My Love rose to #1, while I Know a Place and Don't Sleep in the Subway reinforced an image of a voice that was both approachable and perfectly attuned to a new urban sensibility. Relentless touring schedules, major television appearances, and back-to-back transatlantic flights pulled her into a global circuit unlike anything she had experienced before. Alongside the hits, record sales multiplied at an exponential rate. Figures exceeding 70 million copies are often cited, with varying degrees of exaggeration, but the scale of success itself is indisputable. Petula Clark had crossed the threshold from a European phenomenon to a genuine global star. Behind that breakthrough came new pressures, new exhaustion, and a harsher rhythm of life, yet Downtown permanently redefined her place in the history of popular music, not as a safe alternative, but as the center of a moment of transition. The momentum of Downtown thrust Petula Clark straight into the heart of American popular culture, where television was the most powerful gateway of all. She appeared regularly on major programs such as The Ed Sullivan Show and The Dean Martin Show, not merely as a singer delivering a hit, but as a representative figure of a generation of British artists capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. market. Special programs bearing her name were produced, placing Petula in the rare position of a female artist who sang, hosted, and controlled her image before tens of millions of viewers, an entirely different pressure from the European stages where she had once set the pace more discreetly. Alongside television, American cinema opened another front no less demanding. In 1968, Petula entered Finian's Rainbow opposite Fred Astaire, a figure already legendary. The age gap between them fueled skepticism, but it also compelled Petula to restrain surface charm and dig deeper into the inner life of Sharon McLonergan rather than relying on easy appeal. The film was not a box office explosion, yet her performance proved convincing enough to earn a Golden Globe nomination, an important acknowledgement that Petula Clark was not merely crossing over into American film, but could stand on her own acting merit. Pressure intensified further with Goodbye, Mr. Chips in 1969. Originally cast in the female lead, Petula was abruptly replaced just before filming, a devastating blow for any artist at the height of success. Being called back at the last minute after her replacement encountered difficulties was no stroke of luck, but an even harsher test. She now had to shoulder a role inseparable from Greer Garson's iconic portrayal, while preparing in an extremely short time for a character spanning multiple stages of life. That strain forced Petula to draw on every ounce of professional discipline she had accumulated since childhood, singing, acting, and sustaining emotional credibility against an overwhelming standard. As American cinema allowed little margin for error, the stage became the space where Petula could reaffirm her depth. Taking on the role of Maria Von Trapp in The Sound of Music on Broadway shattered age-based assumptions tied to the character and required her to rely on lived experience rather than physical youth. Night after night of demanding performances tested not only her stamina, but also her inner balance, an ongoing dialogue between the public memory of a pop star and the reality of a stage actress carrying an entire production through voice and lived emotion. The peak of her theatrical journey came with Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. The character, a film star abandoned by time, stood in chilling contrast to Petula Clark's real-life image as a beloved and continuously active performer. Hundreds of performances in succession forced her to inhabit the mindset of a woman haunted by lost fame, probing the darker corners of dependence on the spotlight and the loneliness behind the glow. This role was not merely a professional challenge, it became one of the defining theatrical marks of Petula's life, confronting her head-on with the very question her career had long avoided. What remains when the stage lights finally go out? Once she stood at the center of American popular culture, Petula Clark began to reach moments when music was no longer merely entertainment. In 1968, during a special program on NBC, she sang On the Path of Glory as a duet with Harry Belafonte, a protest song aired at a time when the United States was being torn apart by racial conflict. At the song's climax, Petula gently reached out and touched his arm. Just a few seconds, unscripted, uncalculated, with no intention to provoke. Yet in that context, a white woman touching a black man on national television was something almost unimaginable. The reaction was immediate. Sponsors and network censors deemed the gesture a boundary violation, fearing boycotts from conservative states, and demanded the segment be re-recorded. Every trace of physical contact removed and replaced with a safer version. The pressure was not merely technical, it carried an implicit warning about the future of Petula's television career in America. Faced with that choice, Petula and her husband refused to compromise. She insisted on keeping the original footage and ordered all replacement takes destroyed. accepting the risk of being pulled from broadcast rather than allowing that moment to be erased. When the program aired just days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the gesture, so small on the surface, took on extraordinary weight. No slogan, no manifesto, only the simple acknowledgement that two human beings could stand together without fear. And it was precisely that simplicity that made it one of the rare, quietly powerful civil rights moments in American television history. Only a year later, Petula appeared in an entirely different setting, this time without stage lights or a television script. In Montreal in 1969, she happened upon the room where John Lennon and Yoko Ono were holding their bed-in for peace. With no plan and no preparation, Petula added her voice to give peace a chance amid the chaotic presence of journalists, artists, and activists. Her contribution to the recording was modest, even hard to distinguish, but her presence reflected exactly who she had become. Someone who consistently stood near the boundaries where music intersected with social conscience, without seeking the spotlight. In Montreal, she also encountered a very different experience. During a bilingual performance at the height of political tension in Quebec, Petula was booed from both sides. When she sang in French, sections of the English-speaking audience reacted angrily. When she switched to English, protests rose just as fiercely from the other side. Standing. On stage, the voice once celebrated for bridging languages suddenly became the focal point of division. The moment laid bare the cost of belonging fully to no single camp, of choosing to stand at a cultural crossroads rather than retreat to a safer side. A position Petula Clark had occupied for much of her life, but one that was never comfortable. It was in this context, when every public choice carried consequences and when her American career no longer followed a smooth trajectory, that Petula Clark's private life shifted onto a different path, quieter, yet no less heavy. In the late 1950s, during her professional stays in Paris to expand her European career, she met Claude Wolff, a French man working in music-related media. Their meeting was simple, devoid of cinematic romance. By then, Petula was accustomed to a life governed by dense schedules and work-centered relationships. Claude appeared as a rare point of stability, calm, grounded, and unimpressed by fame. Their bond grew from a sense of safety she seldom experienced in a life lived under constant scrutiny. They married in 1961, just as Petula's international career began to accelerate. The marriage did not unfold amid flashing cameras, but through practical decisions, choosing to live primarily in Europe, balancing two continents and attempting to build a home between relentless flights. 3 children followed, giving Petula a role entirely different from stage and studio. Yet it was here that quiet tensions began to surface. As her fame spread across America and Europe, family life had to adapt to a rhythm fractured by tours, contracts, and professional obligations. Prolonged absences, hurried departures, and brief reunions gradually accumulated into a deep sense of guilt, especially while the children were still young. The burden was not only absence, but the pressure to be perfect in every role. Petula demanded of herself that she be a devoted mother, a proper wife, and an artist who could never afford to falter. That pace slowly eroded both her physical strength and emotional resilience. Claude, serving simultaneously as husband and manager, stood between two worlds that grew increasingly difficult to reconcile. Family life revolved around Petula's career, while she carried the persistent feeling that she was always arriving late to her children's lives. The conflicts never erupted into dramatic confrontations, but accumulated over years through fatigue, silence, and unfillable gaps. As the children grew older, the distance didn't disappear. It transformed into a lasting ache. Petula later looked back on that period with profound self-reproach, not for a lack of love, but for an inability to be fully present in the way a mother wishes to be. Her marriage to Claude was shaped by the same dynamic. He was both husband and professional partner, blurring the boundary between family and career. The strain did not come from explosive arguments, but from prolonged weariness and the gradual drift of two people living in parallel orbits. Petula carried the burden of needing to be flawless in every role, while Claude faced the reality that his wife's career demanded constant sacrifice from those closest to her. The distance did not arrive suddenly. It grew over time, alongside changes in work, geography, and life priorities. By the 1980s, they no longer lived as a couple in the traditional sense, though they never chose formal legal separation. Their relationship evolved into another form, less dramatic, yet deeply tinged with regret, where connection was sustained not by romance, but by responsibility, shared history, and family bonds. For Petula, it was not a story of a spectacularly broken love, but a prolonged form of loss, inseparable from the feeling that the success she achieved had taken far more than the public ever saw. That loss became tangible when Claude Wolfe passed away on March 20th, 2024, closing more than 6 decades of connection in a way that defied simple labels of marriage or separation. Though they had lived on separate trajectories for many years, Claude's death left a profound emptiness, because he was not only a former husband, but the witness to Petula Clark's entire journey of growth, fracture, and self-questioning. For her, it was not the shock of a recently ended love, but the sense of losing a part of life that had existed for so long. It had become a silent foundation, where family memories, professional choices, and irreversible sacrifices had all taken root. Petula Clark's legacy did not take shape at a single moment, nor was it forged by one decisive victory. It accumulated slowly, through her refusal to disappear. In a century when the entertainment industry constantly renews itself, where child stars are often discarded as they grow up and female voices are replaced in ruthless cycles, Petula endured as a rare exception. She did not cling to past glory, nor did she force herself to chase every new trend. Instead, she continually shifted her professional position in order to remain standing, even when she was no longer at the center of attention. From the experience of being constrained as a child star and the long years spent redefining herself, Petula understood early on that a career could not depend on a single market or a single language. Her deliberate choice to record in multiple languages was not merely a strategy to expand her audience, it was a form of self-protection against the industry's disposability. Long before the idea of a global star became commonplace, Petula was already living that reality, moving between Britain, France, continental Europe, and the United States as parallel spaces where she never had to begin again from nothing. Her legacy is therefore tied to a rare professional model, an artist not confined to one cultural identity. When Downtown placed her at the center of American popular culture, that legacy gained another dimension. The song did not endure simply as a hit, but as a psychological image of the modern city, a place where people seek refuge from loneliness in light and motion. The fact that Downtown continues to appear in films and television decades later is not mere nostalgia. It is because the song still works on human emotion. Petula never needed to repeat that success. The simple fact that it never became outdated is itself part of her legacy. Her later presence on American television and stages revealed yet another choice: refusing to trade herself for safety. The moment she touched Harry Belafonte's arm, her willingness to take on psychologically demanding stage roles at an age when many artists retreat, or her acceptance of leaving the center of the pop charts for longer-form performance spaces, none of these created scandal. Instead, they accumulated a quiet authority. Petula did not build her legacy through rebellion, but through the boundaries she refused to retreat from. For that reason, Petula Clark's legacy does not conclude with awards, sales figures, or easily remembered milestones. It lies in the fact that she completed a full artistic life cycle without being erased from history, without being consumed by a single image, and without surrendering the right to remain human after the lights went out. Her later career was not loud, but it was solid enough that when Petula quietly stepped back, the space she left behind still had a distinct shape. When the melody of downtown drifts through a city now vastly different from the 1960s, what people hear is not just surface joy, but the trace of a life that traveled far simply to endure. In that voice are war, pressure, choices that could never be undone, and the loneliness of a woman standing beneath global spotlights, yet rarely allowed to stop and be fragile. Petula Clark did not sing to conceal her life. She sang in order to keep living alongside it. Petula Clark did not become an icon because she was perfect or because her life was free of fractures. She endures because of a rare persistence, the courage to pass through every phase of the entertainment industry without losing herself, the willingness to accept the cost of fame without turning it into a public tragedy. In a world that constantly demands artists be younger, newer, and more replaceable, Petula chose longevity through humanity, through disciplined work, and through honesty about her own limits. And perhaps that is why, when a familiar Petula Clark melody unexpectedly surfaces somewhere, people do not remember only a song. They remember the feeling that even when human beings are swept along by their era, they can still leave behind a trace of decency. Do you remember the first time Downtown or another Petula Clark song reached you? Share that moment in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to continue traveling with us as we explore the lives of artists who passed through the spotlight and left behind something deeper than glamour.